What is going on, guys? So today we are back with another video, and today we're actually going to be taking a look into a Pokemon who has quite an interesting event coming up centered around a community day, and that Pokemon is, well, Turtwig for the community day, but the one that we're actually concerned about here is Torterra, who will be actually getting a very particular move. Speculatively, we're looking at Frenzy Plant. And there's some interesting things about Torterra with Frenzy Plant, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. I'm surprised and also underwhelmed at the exact same time, so we'll get to that. So Torterra here is a grass and ground type Pokemon, maxing out at 2934, so a huge CP there. But to get into the Great League, you can run the 0-1 attack, 11 defense, 13 stamina at 19.5, which does give a clean 1500, which is, you know, perfect for the Great League. Plus it yields the largest stat product there, so that is all good. Now, according to my numbers, my spreadsheets and all the math that I have done in the just overall Great League, just the generalistic freestyle, Torterra unfortunately is only 421st in bulk and 103rd in stat products. So quite odd that he's kind of that low in bulk, but I guess it makes sense because he does have a pretty high CP there. He does have quite a bit of numbers, you know, locked away in his stats here, so unfortunately that does mean that the bulk number can't be super high, especially at only level 19.5. But, I mean, he kind of makes up for it in stat products, so I guess that works out pretty decently. So all of that, of course, does come from our base stats here, like we talked about. A 202 on attack, 188 defense, and 216 in stamina. So that's actually not a horrible spread there. The stamina being higher actually does set us up to be pretty good there. Of course, if we could flip the attack and defense, it would be a little bit better, but either way, we can rock with that. So that's kind of a meh situation in my opinion. But it all depends on some moves that we've got down here. And we're not going to spend too much time. I'm just going to kind of point out some interesting things here. So between Bite and Razor Leaf, exact same energy per turn gain. But Razor Leaf, of course, is going to do more damage, especially after stab. So Razor Leaf is just a no-brainer. There's no sense in going with Bite in most of the situations that we're going to look at today. I'm sure there are a few instances and a few matchups here or there that possibly could call for Bite being better, but in general, Razor Leaf is just the one we want to go with here. And then we have Stone Edge, Solar Beam, and Earthquake as our current move pool. We're not going to talk about Frenzy Plant just yet. Out of those three moves, Solar Beam, of course, is the oddball option, only because it does cost 80 energy to fire. Considering that we're only gaining 2 energy per turn, we really want, you know, the fastest move possible. So Stone Edge and Earthquake make a lot more sense there, and both of those generally in most cups actually cover a ton of different things, which actually sets us up to be pretty good there. Now, on to Frenzy Plant. Probably the entire reason that most of you guys clicked on this video. Frenzy Plant was interesting to say the least. So I have the numbers for the main moveset that we're going to run today, plus I have numbers for Frenzy Plant as well, and it kind of depended on the cup which move Frenzy Plant really took over. I mean, in general, Stone Edge was the one to come out, because Stone Edge doesn't get stabbed and it actually falters in the efficiency area. It does kind of make a little bit more sense if we just want to go for pure speed. Just pure speed, Frenzy Plant and Stone Edge make a lot more sense. But if we run Frenzy Plant and Earthquake, we almost have the same kind of role as Meganium in a lot of situations. But either way, I think depending on how you personally want to run, the Torterra will be completely fine whether you choose Stone Edge or Earthquake. But Frenzy Plant did actually make a little bit of difference in some areas, but oddly enough, in general, I actually saw numbers go down, which was really interesting because I just couldn't imagine that. I mean, I will be fair. In a lot of situations, I took out Stone Edge and left Earthquake because 2 stab-based moves, Earthquake going to be hitting for a ton of damage, while Frenzy Plant going to be hitting for a ton of damage at an even lower cost. Everything just screamed Frenzy Plant was just going to be an amazing move, and Earthquake seemed to be the better move to keep instead of Stone Edge. That's debatable, of course, but numbers went down, which I mean, there's a couple of like shield scenarios where numbers went up just a little bit, but in general, we went down with Frenzy Plant. And the only thing that I can come up with is that in general, because we have such a low energy gain per turn, and because we have so little bulk, we're running into a problem where even though we do have Frenzy Plant, which is way more efficient, the problem is that in general, there's not, in situations where grass would be preferred, Frenzy Plant makes immensely more sense. It just makes so much more sense to run Frenzy Plant. But in other scenarios where grass is just neutral, then it doesn't really like help us any. It just kind of sets us up to be okay. The reason for that is because we only generally get off one charge move because we have such little energy gain, and we're basically like stuck between, do we use Stone Edge, do we use Frenzy Plant? Or if we're running Earthquake, do we use Earthquake or do we use Frenzy Plant? And in most of the cups that we're going to be featured in, Frenzy Plant doesn't hit a lot of things super effectively. It hits some things, yes, like Mud Boys, like Azumarill. Yeah, it'll hit those for super effective, but outside of that, we're not really like actually hitting a whole lot, which is interesting. So for the purpose of this video, I will talk about Frenzy Plant in each cup. I will give you the numbers for it, but it's still awkward. And if we don't get Frenzy Plant, if by chance Niantic decides to do something totally crazy and give Torterra some other Community Day move, I'd love it because it'd be something different, something new, not the same old stale Frenzy Plant that we've had. Yes, Frenzy Plant is amazing, don't get me wrong, but I'd like a change at this point. With that being said, what we're actually going to run in most of our cups, actually in all of our cups, is actually going to be Razor Leaf, Earthquake, and Stone Edge. And like I said, I'll mention Frenzy Plant and give you the numbers for it, but in general, we're talking about Earthquake and Stone Edge for the majority of our situations today. So in terms of the cups that Torterra is actually going to be able to be featured in today, we have the Boulder Cup, Tempest Cup, Season 1 Regionals, and the Jungle Cup, which is nice. I don't think anybody's really planning on running the Jungle Cup at this point, but it's there. So starting off in our Boulder Cup here, we do have our 0 versus 0, which is a 43.8% win ratio. We actually have wins up against Marshtomp, Swampert, Whiscash, Melmetal, Poliwrath, Bastiodon, and Gallade. So right off the bat, we kind of see that the Mud Boys are already a huge target. The fact that we have Razor Leaf is kind of the bread and butter of what Torterra is going to be good at. He's going to be super good at taking out anything that's weak to grass. And the Mud Boys having a super duper weakness to the grass is huge. That's so big. And that kind of plays into the fact that we only get one charge move off. And the fact that we already demolish most things that are super like weak to Razor Leaf already, our Frenzy Plant's just kind of there to take on whatever they send out after the fact. And if you're playing against someone that's halfway experienced, they're gonna know not to just dump a Pokemon that's gonna be super weak to Frenzy Plant right after you've been charging up Frenzy Plant this entire time. So it's kind of an awkward situation, but with Frenzy Plant, you do get boosted up to a 56.3 in the 0 versus 0 there. So next we have our 1 versus 0 situation here, which is a 68.8%. We actually have losses up against Toxicroak, Medicham, Skarmory, and Lucario here. And I would say most of those are okay, understandable. I mean, Toxicroak is going to have some resistance there. Medicham is going to be, you know, Medicham with Ice Punch. I mean, we're going to have a huge problem with that. Skarmory, yeah, we're going to have some issues there, and Lucario's just, you know, going to be able to wreck most things with Power Up Punch as is. So those are kind of the biggest things that we really need to watch out for. And it goes worth mentioning here that because of our typing, grass and ground, we do have that super duper weakness to ice type moves. So we really, really have to be careful about what we throw our Torterra up against, because we could take a lot of damage, and we really don't want to. So that's kind of another point up against Azumarill, but we'll try to talk about that later. Now with Frenzy Plant, we actually do get boosted up to an 81.3% here. So Frenzy Plant is actually helping us out quite a bit in the Boulder Cup already. Next we move on to our 0 versus 1, which is a 31.3%, winning up against Marshtomp, Swampert, Whiscash, Poliwrath, and Gallade. So even though we're a shield down in that scenario, Marshtomp, Swampert, Whiscash all gonna have some big weakness to Razor Leaf as is. Poliwrath also gonna fall into that, and Gallade. Actually, Gallade just isn't going to have a whole lot to like dish out to us. If we're using Razor Leaf, we're going to output tons more damage, even if he's using Confusion. I mean, if he's using Charm, I mean, we'd still outpace him in the damage area just by a little bit. So I guess that makes a little bit of sense. Plus, his charge moves doesn't really have a whole lot that can really like hit us for super effective damage at least. So we're kind of just... It honestly is going to be whoever can just dish out the most fast move damage, and Gallade just kind of ends up losing there. Next we have our 1 versus 1 shield scenario, which is a clean 50% here, losing up against Bastiodon, Toxicroak, Bronzong, Medicham, Lucario, Jirachi, and Skarmory. So some big names there, and most of those are pretty understandable. There's not too much variance there amongst our 0 versus 0. We do pick up the Jirachi matchup, which is quite an interesting one, and we do have Bastiodon there as well. So I guess those kind of do make sense. With Frenzy Plant, though, we do get boosted up to 56.3% there. So we actually do pretty well. Average across all 4 of those shield situations without Frenzy Plant is a 48.5%. With Frenzy Plant, 57.85. So already, Frenzy Plant does show up really nice in the Boulder Cup. But this is kind of where it gets a little bit wonky, because moving into the Tempest Cup, starting in our 0 versus 0, we have a 35% here, winning up against Swampert, Quagsire, Whiscash, Alolan Golem, Raichu, Lantern, and Lapras. So most of those make some sense. They are going to have some weakness to Razor Leaf right off the bat. If we add Frenzy Plant in, again, keeping Earthquake, removing Stone Edge, adding Frenzy Plant, we do go up to a 40%, which is great. That means that the one charge move that we're basically going to be able to get off in most scenarios, we're going to hit with it. And whenever we hit with it, we do better with it. So that's great. Next, in the 1 versus 0 situation, we actually end up with a 65%, losing up against Tropius, Altaria, Skarmory, Glalie, Abomasnow, and Charizard. So I guess most of those are pretty understandable. Tropius is going to be the bulk master. Altaria is going to be the damage output master, really. Skarmory is going to have a ton of stuff to be able to output towards us. Glalie going to be rocking, what is it? Powder Snow, or I think it's Ice Shard. Either way, Glalie going to have access to Ice type moves. Abomasnow is going to have access to Razor Leaf itself. Plus, I guess if it wanted to, it would be running what? It probably has access to that. Or if you're running the variant with Abomasnow that actually runs Powder Snow up front, that's actually pretty cool. And then Charizard, I mean, I guess that's okay. With Frenzy Plant, here's where it gets weird. We go from a 65% without Frenzy Plant down to a 60% with Frenzy Plant. So we actually start to lose more with Frenzy Plant right there, which is just awkward. Next, moving into our 0 versus 1, we actually have a 35% this time, winning up against Swampert, Quagsire, Whiscash, Alolan Golem, Raichu, Lantern, Lapras. So the exact same set in the 0 versus 0. So whether or not we give them a shield, those Pokemon still end up fainting to us. With Frenzy Plant, we actually keep the exact same. We actually stay at a 35% there. So kind of interesting. Last but not least, in the Tempest Cup, we do have our 1 versus 1, which is a 60%, losing up against Glalie, Abomasnow, Alolan Sandslash, Charizard, Tropius, Skarmory, and Altaria. So with Frenzy Plant, we actually go down to a 55%. It's weird. I mean, it's crazy that it works out like that. So in my notes, I literally have a 48.75 average across everything in the Tempest Cup, all 4 of those shield situations, without Frenzy Plant. With Frenzy Plant, it goes down to 47.5, and I was like, what? Like, I literally wrote, huh? In my notes. So it's kind of awkward, but next we move into the Season 1 Regionals here with a 0 versus 0. We actually hit 26.1%. Winning up against Quagsire, Whiscash, Melmetal, Lantern, Sableye, and Bastiodon. Now, after we add Frenzy Plant, we do actually have a little bit better of a chance here. We actually go up to 30.4%, so that's actually pretty good. Next, in our 1 versus 0, we actually have a 69.6% here, losing up against Tropius, Altaria, Fortress, Medicham, Skarmory, Venusaur, and Charizard. So, quite a few interesting matches there. After we add in Frenzy Plant, though, it does go down to 65.2. which is interesting. Next we move into the 0 versus 1, which is a 21.7% here, winning up against Quagsire, Whiscash, Lantern, Melmetal, and Sableye. So most of those make a little bit of sense. Melmetal is kind of an interesting one to win against, but Earthquake is going to be doing a ton of damage to the Melmetal, so I guess that makes complete sense once you factor that in. After we factor in Frenzy Plant though, it goes down 17.4. What? Next we move into the 1 versus 1, which is a 43.5%, winning up against Lantern, Whiscash, Quagsire, Azumarill, Sableye, Magneton, Melmetal, Frostyce, Steelix, and Haunter. And most of those are actually okay. After we factor in Frenzy Plant though, down to a 39.1. Okay, so averaging out all 4 of those shield situations without Frenzy Plant is a 40.2%. After we add in Frenzy Plant, it does go down to a 38.03. Last but not least, we do have the Jungle Cup here with a 29.4. We actually win up against a Alolan Golem, a Alolan Graveler, Lantern, Magnezone, Wigglytuff, and I'd actually say that those are pretty okay there. I mean, we don't have the Vigoroth win in the Jungle Cup, but that's actually not too bad. Winning up against Wigglytuff is actually pretty interesting there, and beating Magnezone is actually pretty cool there. But I guess we do have quite the resistance to the electric type moves. But either way, after we add in Frenzy Plant, we actually stay the same at a 29.4. So okay. Next we move into the 1 versus 0, which is a 52.9%, losing up against Fortress, Victreebel, Venusaur, Beedrill, Scizor, and Vespiquen. And after we actually factor in Frenzy Plant, down to a 47.1. Odd again. 0 versus 1 here, we do have a 23.5, winning up against a Alolan Golem, a Alolan Graveler, Lantern, and Magnezone, which still, all those make a fair bit of sense. After we factor in Frenzy Plant though, it does go up actually to a 29.4. So okay, and then in our 1 versus 1, the last shield scenario for the Jungle Cup, we have a 41.2, winning up against Magnezone, Alolan Golem, Alolan Graveler, Lantern, Magneton, Raichu, and Vigoroth. So we actually do end up picking up the Vigoroth in the 1v1 shield scenario there, which is actually pretty nice. After we factor in Frenzy Plant though, we actually stay the same, a 41.2. So after we average all that stuff together, this one's actually a really close one. So without Frenzy Plant, it's a 36.75. After Frenzy Plant, it's a 36.78. So for what it's worth, I guess in the Jungle Cup you do just a tiny bit better with Frenzy Plant. But comparing all of the cups together, I would say that a Boulder Cup is for sure. Yeah, you should definitely take a look at freaking Torterra. Almost a clean 50% even without Frenzy Plant. Once we add in Frenzy Plant to that, it goes up to a whopping 57 on average. A 57% win ratio across all of the major, like, legitimate, I guess you could say, shield scenarios. In the Boulder Cup that's huge. And the fact that we hit that after Frenzy Plant is pretty nice. So Boulder Cup by far, yes, in actual both scenarios. Whether you have Frenzy Plant or not, if your tournament is like tomorrow and you've got a Boulder Cup, definitely like take a look into Torterra. In the Tempest Cup, it's kind of the same situation. Yes, on both sides, with or without Frenzy Plant. Now Frenzy Plant actually is going to perform just a tad bit worse. So I maybe wouldn't like prioritize Frenzy Plant there, but in the Tempest Cup he still actually performs at almost the 50% mark for averaging out all 4 of those shield scenarios in both situations. So I definitely say yes, check him out in there. Now Season 1 Regionals is the weird one. So I talked about how we were going to come back around to Azumarill. Azumarill is kind of an awkward one here because Azumarill is actually going to have Ice Beam, if I'm not mistaken. It's not Ice Punch. I always want to say Ice Punch. And that's actually going to give us quite a bit of a problem. So even though the Pokemon that we should actually be doing pretty well up against are the water type, Azumarill's actually got a bit of punch packed into it, so if it possibly has energy already stored up, if it switches in on us and it gets off that Ice Beam really fast, whatever it may be, it's actually a pretty big threat, even though we are going to be able to do a ton of damage with Razor Leaf right out of the gate. In Season 1 Regionals, it's kind of awkward. Across the entire cup, though, I would say meh. I mean, I guess if you had a team that could really let Torterra shine, like if you had a way to protect the Torterra out of your team of 6, if you could build a team of 3 that really like centered around Torterra and let Torterra do a ton of damage, then possibly, yeah, I could see that. But otherwise, like, it's kind of a meh situation. He's not really amazing in Season 1 Regionals, and I think you would have to put a lot of effort into letting him shine rather than just putting him on a team and him shining himself. And then in the Jungle Cup, I mean, it's on the very, very low end, but still kind of meh. I mean, averaging at a 36% in both scenarios is really kind of middle of the road for me. It's kind of on the lower end of the middle of the road. I'm almost like no on that one, but I mean, I guess like in Season 1 Regionals, if you had a team that you could kind of center around Torterra and let him shine, it would be okay. But otherwise, I would maybe kind of pass on Torterra there. So that is actually going to be it for Torterra today, guys. Yeah, the deep dives are coming. Calm down. I'm slowly getting to them. I'm just trying to take my time and have some fun with a different game, and some of you guys really hate that. But either way, yes, the deep dives are still here. I'm actually planning on starting some kind of series where I take a really close look into Pokemon and Pokemon Masters. Of course, most of you guys don't care about that, but that's gonna start happening. I'm not gonna call them deep dives just because I don't want to confuse the people that already watch deep dives, and I just don't want to like have that confusion. So either way, that is actually it for Torterra. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. If you're still a part of the channel, thank you. I tried to tell everybody that I would be doing this a month ago, I think, is when I started telling people like, hey, I'm eventually gonna start looking into Pokemon Masters because it's very interesting and I'm having tons of fun with it. So that's my main goal here, is like I said in the trailer that I put out, the 2019 channel trailer or whatever I called it, I do this to have fun. If it's not fun, then I'm not gonna do it. So that just is what it is. So anyways, thank you guys. I love you guys. I will see you in the next video. Let's play those credits for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Always remember that if you like to like videos, you could do that, but if you don't, you could be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in the comments below about the video. I do highly appreciate you guys watching. If you guys want to support me in any way, there are several links down in the description for Patreon, joining the community here on YouTube, or even just directly PayPal if that's your thing. I greatly appreciate everyone's name that's on screen, as you guys have showed some sort of support outside of just viewing the videos, and I thank you guys. You don't understand from the bottom of my heart. So until our next video, guys, I will catch you then.